So I'll introduce myself. I'm Carl Purcell. I'm going to talk to you about how to move towards a more sustainable diet and why does it matter. Yeah. And I will actually talk more about why does it matter, because I think if we don't know the why, like there won't be a reason to shift actually. And then I will talk, I said, like how to do it, how to move towards. So first, I want to do some definitions, cover what is plant-based. So it's eating mostly or 100% plants. And vegans are people who adhere to veganism, and veganism is excluding as far as possible and practicable all forms of exploitation and cruelty to animals for food, clothing, and purpose. But today I will mostly focus on plant-based because I would say it would take more time and it's outside of scope to talk about veganism today. So first, who I am, or who am I? So I'm doing now a PhD in paleoclimatology. So I'm studying past climate, the past climate of South Africa to be specific, and doing this while looking at marine sediment cores from the ocean around here. And in the past, I went on scientific expeditions on research vessels, such as the Amundsen, Canadian research vessel, in the Arctic for looking at marine geology, biology, glacier meltwater tracing, and stuff like that. So it was pretty fun. And that was part of my master's in earth science, which was also working on past climates. And then before that, I did a graduate micro program on climate change. And years before that, a bachelor's in engineering materials. So I want to show you with this that I have a big interest with climate, which brought me to this today, actually. So I was aware for years that eating less meat was good for the environment, as many of you are, probably all of you are. All of these headlines show this. So I thought about it, but not really deeply. I never really considered it for years because there was one reason that was preventing me. It was sports. So I was like athlete, but not competitive. I was more like a recreative athlete in martial arts, lifting weights, sprinting and coaching, and also doing parkour for years, since my teens. And I was reading a lot about how to perform optimally. So I knew a lot about bro culture, which is how to get some proteins, and just you need to eat meat for that, to be athletic. So that's what I thought. But then, a few years ago, I found this guy, Clarence Kennedy. So this guy, he's lifting Olympic level, like record weights, and he also does tricking, and all of this on a plant-based diet. So when I saw this, I was like, wow, I have no excuse. I mean, I value the environment. I don't need to eat animals. I have to switch, basically. So that's what happened. And then I was able to get my best performances and be like my role model after switching. So it confirmed my switch was reasonable and it was totally possible to be athletic without eating animals. And here's some more examples of athletes. So you got Venus Williams, which is an Olympic gold medalist, Scott Jurek, which is a legendary endurance athlete, ultra runner, and Dave Leduc, he's a lightweight open weight world title holder, and he's from my home city, Gatineau. And look at this; it's a very brutal sport. He can do headbutts and also there's fighting without gloves, and all of this is accomplished without eating animal products. So, if you need any proof, well, that's it. So, okay, plant-based diets can fuel performance, but is it healthy? Like some people say they heard some people that tried the vegan diet, and they got sick. So there's doubts that it can be healthy. Yeah, but it is. According to all the nutritional bodies of the English-speaking world, it is. And these diets are appropriate for all stages of life, including pregnancy, breastfeeding, infancy, childhood, adolescence, older people, and also athletes. So it is. But I think this is not convincing without looking into the facts. To me, at least, I needed more information. So if you look at diseases or causes of death in the first world, the two major causes are heart disease and cancer. And also there's diabetes, Alzheimer's, but I will mostly focus on heart disease and cancer. So one of the biggest cause of the risk factor actually for these diseases is obesity. And so that's it. And then a study was done for 100,000 people in North America, and it's shown that the people that have eating a plant-based diet do have or stay in the healthy zone, whereas the people who have other diets are always above the danger zone, which put them at risk for heart disease and cancer. So yeah, plant-based diet is a good choice for this. And then this is a meta-analysis by Dinu and al. In 2017, and it showed that so at the top you got vegetarians, at the bottom you got vegans, and the cardiovascular disease is lower for the vegetarians, cancer as well, and in the vegans there was less people available for the study, so only all-cause mortality was studied, and it was also less, but also it was more beneficial than vegetarians. Then if you look at the diet recommended by European Agency for Cardiology, this is the best diet that's recommended, and all of the products here are in green are plant-based, mostly, except for yogurt and fish. And then all the products that are associated with negative health outcomes for heart disease are animal-based, except for these processed foods. So processed foods, of course, are not healthy. Everybody is agreeing with this in nutrition. And then for fish, the benefits in literature are attributed to the omega-3s, which can come from other sources, such as seeds, nuts, and supplements. And then for yogurt, the benefits that are observed, might not be attainable for everybody in the world because most of the world population is lactose intolerant. And I would argue that plant-based yogurts could have the same benefits, but I haven't found studies supporting this, so this needs to be researched. Also, I found this really interesting study recently about longevity, and it's been done here in Bergen at UEB and Haukeland University. And it found that if you switch to a plant-based diet mostly plant-based diet at 20 years old, you could add 13 years for men and 11 years for women. And even as you get older, you can see it's still possible to have some great benefits. So a 60-year-old woman would have 8 years to her life if she did the switch. And how to read this graph is each element here is ranked by order of beneficial impact. And you can see like it's all additive. It all adds to itself. So the most important is to have more legumes, then whole grains and nuts, and then to cut off meat, red meat, processed meats, sugar, refined grains, eggs. But then fish is actually supposed to be beneficial here, and fruit and vegetable. But as I said earlier, the benefits might be gotten from other sources than the fish themselves. So to recap the health and fitness, it's recognized as healthy for all. You can reach your full physical potential, and including Olympic gold. And it reduces your chance of obesity, heart disease, dying prematurely, and it could add to your lifespan. Okay, now back to environment. This is the reason why I switched to a plant-based diet. Why is it better? So first, animal agriculture is responsible for most of these problems in the world. So food, greenhouse gas emissions, land use, freshwater use, eutrophication, and most of the animals in the world, most of the mammals in the world in terms of biomass are farmed animals. And this you can see in the slide. It shows what it looks like from XKCD, a great webcomic. You can see that the humans are like this big dark spot, and all of the gray is the farmed animals, and the green is the wild animals. So you can see it's like only 6% of mammals in the wild are wild. And my interpretation is that farmed animals have replaced wild animals. And by consuming meat and dairy, we finance this. So, yeah. Then for land use, animal agriculture uses most of the agricultural land. So you can see 30% of the land surface is land, of the Earth's surface. Of this, 71% is habitable land. And of this, 50% is agriculture. But most of this, almost 80%, is used for livestock. But this only provides 70% of calories. So it's clearly not optimal. So if we switch to a plant-based diet, we could reduce agricultural land by 75%. And this includes also croplands. So yeah, like half of the cropland, or actually a bit less, 43%, is used to produce crops to feed animals. So if we switch to a plant-based diet for the world, we wouldn't need to have these crops to feed the animals and the pasture. And the calories we would be missing in the world diet could be gained by having a bit more cropland, but still less than a total here. Yeah. And then in terms of greenhouse gas emissions, as I said, most of the calories come from plants, but the animal agriculture gives only 17% of calories, but causes 52% of greenhouse gas emissions. And this figure is actually larger in Europe and probably America as well. So in Europe, it's 83%. And I want to point out that transport is only 6%. So for people who are concerned about the emission during transport, well, their concern is maybe a bit misguided if they haven't adopted a plant-based diet. Now, if you want to put this into context, if you compare, for example, livestock versus driving, well, in Europe, there's driving cars and vans emits more CO2 than eating animals, livestock causes more emissions than driving cars and vans. So there's more impact by cutting meat, dairy, and eggs than by buying an electric car, for example. Now for fishing and fishing versus flying, this slide is a bit more complex, but I'm addressing here the impacts of bottom trawling. So this type of fishing is actually pretty major in the fishing in the world. It's done in Norway, and it consists of dragging a net to the bottom of the sea, and this will destroy the corals and also the sponges and the habitats, and then leave a barren seafloor. And at the same time, it will disturb the sediments and release the carbon that's stored in the sediments. And it will emit between 1.4 or 1,400 million tons of CO2 per year to 600. It actually decreases by every time you do it. But around the 9th year, this figure is stable. So if you compare this to aviation, it's comparable. So cutting out fish is comparable to as never flying. Also, another factor is most of the macroplastic in the world is caused by fishing gear. So this would be also solved if people adopted a diet without fishing. Finally, this is a major solution for climate change. So not only in terms of reducing greenhouse gas emissions, but also allowing sequestration of carbon. So if the lands, as I showed earlier, were the land mass, like 75% of the land used for agriculture were able to be rewilded, the plant matter that would grow there, the the native species would be able to store carbon in their tissue, and this would allow these a storage of like 547 tons, gigatons of CO2, which is comparable or actually larger than what we have in terms of carbon left to reach 1.5 degrees Celsius. And it represents 16 years of greenhouse gas emissions at a current rate. And this figure actually doesn't even include soil carbon storage. So the potential for sequestration is even larger. And then I did some quick math for this. So if you divide the gigatons of carbon by the amount of people, you get 68 tons sequestered per person in 30 years. So you can have it's pretty interesting as a personal solution to climate change. So to recap the environment, the plant-based diet can reduce greenhouse gas emissions, allow sequestration of carbon, reduce land use for agriculture by 75%, and cut out most of the macroplastic in the ocean. And much more, but today I will just mention these. But now back to my story. I was vegetarian for 1 year in my transition to a plant-based diet, and then I was mostly plant-based diet for the environment. But then somebody in my life challenged me. She said, like, why do you cheat? Why do you eat pizza once in a while and say to people it's okay? And then I asked myself, like, is a little bit of dairy and eggs okay? And then I started researching. And what I learned was a bit shocking to me, and it made me talk to you, this audience today, basically. So at first I had this vague notion of farms, like this is like what you see in children's book. I knew it was not totally the truth, but my point here is like, why is this representation so prevalent? Why do we show this to children? And I say it's because adults don't want children to know what happens, because they know that if they do, they will not want to eat animal products because it's just very unappetizing. And the reason why people lie to adults is because they think that you need to eat animals to be healthy. But as I showed earlier, it's not the case. Now, this will be a bit more controversial. I'm showing what happened in World War II. And this is an image from a ghetto, Jewish ghetto in Czechoslovakia that was visited by the Red Cross in 1944. And I'm asking, is this reality? Well, the answer is not. It's not reality. So these people here and the others that were unseen worked to beautify, make the ghetto look nicer, and only the people who look healthy was presented to the visitors. The reality was more stark. This is only part of the reality. These are prisoners from a concentration camp, and they're basically starving to death. And if you guys already know what happened in the Second World War, it's a lot worse than this happens. The people in this picture were only the people surviving. And the full truth was only known after the Allies liberated the camps. And I'm asking here, why did the Nazis regime not show pictures like this? It's because they wanted the support of the people in Germany. Also, they wanted the support of their allies, and also they wanted to not face heavy repercussions in the case they lost the war. So I think there's parallels here with animal ag, because animal agriculture shows a very glossy image of agriculture. So you can see here these cows in the pastures are having a lot of fun. I would like to be there and chill with them, and if they want to give me their milk, why not? I would drink their milk and it would be all great. But the reality is only shown by undercover investigations. And this I will show you next. So this is for dairy. So the dairy cows are tied up in dairy stalls for 8 months per year. And that's 75% of the cows in Norway. And this actually are pictures from farms around Bergen. They're impregnated every year to produce milk, because mammals don't produce milk without being pregnant. And then they're killed after around 6 years old, after a few cycles. And then the calves that are produced are separated from mother at birth, and then they're kept in dirty stalls. And then they are killed shortly, a few days to up to a few months afterwards. And then some females are not, they're used to replace their moms. So this slide was there to show that they're both part of the meat industry. So they're shot to death by a stun gun, shot to stun them, and then they have a knife put in their throat to bleed them. Then for eggs, well, leg-hanging eggs have about a piece of paper of area for space, and that's even including free-range chickens in Norway. And they're killed at 18 months by gassing, and that's around 3 million chickens in Norway. And they're not used for food, surprisingly. They're actually thrown away because consumers prefer another race or another breed of chicken, basically. And then for chicks, well, the hens need replacement, right? So there's fertilized eggs. The males are ground alive, as you can see here, or they're put in a gas chamber. So my point is that eating eggs implies killing. Then for pigs, a big portion of them are dying in the first week, often beaten to death by the farmers, by blows to the heads or hit with shovels. Or they also take the animals and just hit them on the ground or on the walls. Most of them never see the sun. They're raised in crowded conditions, often preventing sleep, and they're killed at 5 months old. And 65% of farms visited by Diers Frihet in Norway, of the 65 farms, all of them had violations. And then when they're about to get killed, they have first to be stunned. And how it's done here in Norway is mostly by CO2 stunning. And this burns their lungs, their mucous membranes. And then footage that's been provided of how they die or how they are stunned in these conditions show that they panic and they scream. And then their throat is cut. Then for sheep are used for wool and meat. And they're staying indoors for most of the year, 8 months. And then in bins of 10 meters for 10 sheep, so that's around 1 meter square per sheep. And the sheep, they're killed at 4 years, and the lambs are killed around 6 months. So my point here is that they're part of the food industry, and wearing wool implies killing. Then for salmons, I put a lot of information here, but I want to point out that mostly that there is around almost 1 billion salmons in Norway that are fished, that are farmed. And they have issues such as lice and disease. And this is compared to like 0.5 million salmons in Norway. And the farmed salmons are a threat to the wild salmons, according to what I found here. And this is due to interbreeding and diseases. And then my last animal I want to cover is the human animal. So farming is a very dangerous profession. So in Norway, there's 8 times the risk of dying on the job compared to other occupations. And animal-related injuries are very common, or one of the most common causes of injuries and death in this type of industry. And then for slaughterhouse workers, they have 10 to 50% higher prevalence of depression, also increased anxiety, attitudes that predispose them to violence, and also crimes. And I had some own personal experience in these industries. So I was living in the agricultural areas, let's say, and I was helping a worker to prepare the hooves of the cows. And this is done by you have to raise the cow in the air by a mechanical means. And I didn't do my job correctly, and the lever just went flying and hit me on the head pretty strongly. And then another story is my brother, he was helping a horse being castrated, and the horse was not being well sedated. He just lifted his head, threw my brother meters away. And somebody in my family was working with horses or cows, I forget, and he was just kicked by these animals, by one animal, and he's been not able to hike or ski since without pain. So it's pretty dangerous physically. And then for slaughterhouse, I actually applied, it's kind of surprisingly, I applied to work in a chicken slaughterhouse. And during the interview, I think my skin color was like this at first, but then it slowly turned into green. And it just confirms, I was a bit like, oh, I don't want to work here. And I can't imagine how it is for workers who have to have no choice but to take these jobs. It can put a huge strain on their personal lives. So the recap of ethics. Well, it's now well known that dairy cows and calves are killed for meat. Egg-laying hens are killed. Male chicks are ground up alive. Sheep and lambs are killed for meat. And farm salmons threaten wild salmons. So in the previous section on health, I established that we don't need to eat meat to be healthy and fit. Therefore, mass breeding, using and killing of animals is unnecessary. So the only justification remaining is tradition, sensory pleasure, and monetary gain. And maybe that last term is a bit strong. By that I mean the livelihood of the workers and the profit of the industries, of the big industries, let's say. But all of these points can be addressed. So tradition can be changed. So for example, there's no more human sacrifices in Mexico. I don't think Mexicans are complaining. Sensory pleasure, I mean, you can discover delicious plant-based cuisine. And then for the monetary gains, there are products that exist to help farmers transition to plant-based agriculture. And this is an example from Sweden. It's Halsa. And there's many other projects I found in my research. And also Big Ag is already investing massively in plant-based. So, yeah. Now, something I want to quickly address is individual versus systemic change. So we are 8 billion humans, and we're killing around 800 billion animals, vertebrates per year. And so what difference could individual do? Like what difference could you make, could I make? And the problem is like so big, maybe, we could think we need governments and institutions to do changes as first. But I argue here that no, one person can make a difference. So according to like worldwide data, 1 year on plant-based diet can save up to around 105 animals. But I think it's actually more for people in Western countries such as here, because we eat a lot more than the worldwide averages. Of course, we can also reduce greenhouse gas emissions and sequester some carbon and free up land. But I want to go back to the point that for the animals that are spared, this makes a huge difference. This is a huge difference. And over the years, you can spare the lives of a lot of animals. Second point is that systemic change is started by individuals. So here's an example for slavery. So slavery was common in the world before. And in the British Empire, there was this abolition society that was started in 1787, with only 12 members. And these people obviously grew in number. And over the years, they made some victories. They banned the slave trade, and then they banned slavery itself in the empire. And I'm asking here, did these founders own slaves? And I actually don't know the answer, but I'm assuming they didn't. So my point is, people who adopt plant-based diets can do it and then be part of the movement that changes things and make a big difference. And here are some examples I found. So there's the plant-based diet is on the rise in food products, restaurants, and more people are increasingly adhering to this. And organizations are also doing it. So Oslo municipality now offers plant-based by default. And also there's the Erasmus School of Economics that was switched to a plant-based by default by Professor Jan Stoop. And I think that the next university could be Universiteit i Bergen. It's hard to say, Universiteit. Yeah, and this could make a big difference. So according to my math, it could save up to 70,000 animals per year and emit 4,000 tons of CO2 less per year. So this would be massive. Also, there's other types of actions happening. There's pressure campaigns, and they had many successes in the past. And here's a recent example. So France and Germany is the first countries to ban chick culling. And this Sunday you could join a demonstration for the safety of whales, if you want. Okay, so now practical aspects. So for me, it took like 1 year to switch to a plant-based diet. And I think it could be done a lot faster. So first you have to inform yourself, find good resources of information on nutrition, then get some recipes, and then finally start cooking. And if you're in a rush or you're lazy, you can Google 5-minute vegan recipe and do it, or eat pre-made food from the grocery or restaurants. And here's the good resource on nutrition. You can find many of them online for free, and I found this one to be excellent from nutritionfacts.org. And it's made by a general practitioner that's specializing in clinical nutrition. And I want to just quickly tell you in 30 seconds how to do healthfully transition. So half of your plate, vegetables, a quarter beans, and a quarter whole grains. And then you'll have all of the basics. And to this you can add, I mean, it's good to add nuts and seeds and of course fruits and berries. And then for nutritional concerns, people are often concerned about nutrients such as calcium, iron, and protein. But the bottom line is that if you follow the diet that I showed earlier, in the previous slide, you will be good. You will be covering all of these and get plenty of these nutrients. But then what's important is you actually need to get your B12 because deficiencies can cause problems, and plant-based foods generally don't have enough of this. And most farm animals actually do receive B12, and in Norway they also have B12 or cobalt to produce B12 in their digestive systems. And B12 is naturally produced in the environment by microbes, and it's lacking now in sanitized environments and animal feed, so it needs to be added to your diet. And in this slide you also see that vitamin D is important to add, as for all diets in northern countries. Omega-3s and iodine are also worth considering. What I found is that it's easy for breakfast to replace animal spreads and milks with plant-based versions, replace eggs with scrambled tofu, and then for lunch and dinner, which are more complex recipes usually, you can start integrating one recipe at a time. But you gotta be aware that plant-based food is less dense in calories, so you need to eat more food. And it's a good idea to track your calories at first when you switch, which takes only 5 minutes per day. And this is how I did it at first. I use Chronometer, and it's great to see if your diet is on point. So you can see you put all of the items you eat in the day, and then you can get all the calories and the macronutrients. But then what's more of concern is the micronutrients. If you're concerned about being deficient in anything, you can check it here. And you can see on this day, I got all my vitamins except vitamin D, which can be had by the sun or supplements. I got 1 to 4 times the amount of all the minerals I need. I got almost 400% the amount of iron I needed. And for the proteins, I got 170 grams and between 2 to 4 times the amount of essential amino acids. So it's not a concern, basically. If you need enough calories, with a varied diet, you'll have plenty of what all of you need. Next step is to find some recipes. So here's some examples where I found some good recipes. So the guy I showed earlier, one of my favorite guys is Avant-Garde Vegan. Also, the Game Changers has its own website full of recipes and also nutritional information, and Rainbow Plant Life. Then you can start cooking. So here's an example for a day with oatmeal at the beginning, a burger at lunch, and then for dinner, it's smoky black-eyed peas with quinoa and broccoli, and some snacks on top of it. And here are some of my favorites. So, the cheesecake, the pizza, the steak, the pancakes, and curry, chickpea curry. So you can have really delicious foods when you switch to a plant-based diet. If you're in a hurry or lazy, you can do quick recipes such as peanut butter sandwich, which I love, or 5-minute burrito bowl, which I had for lunch. It's really quick. You just open cans of beans, of pre-made rice, corn, and you can add avocados if you want. You can go to restaurants, and you can also go to pre-made food. And then for grocery, you can get most of the foods everywhere, but the specialty items I found here are found more easily in many. And you can use these apps for the restaurants. You can use Vegan Norway and also Ethi-Karl to find some restaurants everywhere in Norway. Or in the world. Ethi-Karl is probably actually worldwide. I also want to say that plant-based is cheaper. So it's been found to be 30% cheaper in rich countries such as Norway. And the difference would be even larger if with the livestock industry, it wasn't subsidized so heavily. So most of the most of the income for farmers in Norway is actually from taxpayer. And this is actually the highest in the world. But yeah. So now, I want to say, what's the biggest obstacle to plant-based diet? It's actually not the nutrition, I think. It's the fear of being different, the fear of ostracism by family and friends. And sometimes people can act defensively. And like this meme I showed is actually kind of relevant. So, your family members can think that you're lacking, you're concerned. Like my mom was like, oh, are you getting enough proteins? Are you getting enough iron? But you can easily address that. Again, get your information and just, that's it. But so this can be difficult sometimes, but it's getting more and more common to be plant-based. And there's a big vegan community that are very welcoming and nice. There's jokes sometimes, but it's not really a thing, a problem, and it's less important than the lives of the animals. And I think that a life of principles can give you strength. So that's good for overcoming these obstacles. And this is my last slide. So my take-home message is not to remember all of the slides or of the information I told you, but to ask yourself these questions. So are you directly contributing to needless suffering? What could you do about it? And if you think the systemic change is required, what steps could you take to change the system? And for me, this step will be to help UAB move towards a more plant-based diet, or catering actually. So that's it. Thanks for your time, guys.